There you
Bang.
go. What number?
135.
Nice.
1, 3,
Nice.
5. In the books.
In the books. Well, not yet.
Well, almost.
We've at least kicked it off. Hey, I
That's
like
right.
that hat. What? Tell us a little bit about the hat.
Now, this is Turkey and the Wolf.
Hmm.
This is probably the best sandwich shop in the United States. But if you ever wanted some outrageously good sandwich in New Orleans, Pete,
Mhm.
we're talking about a sandwich that's like that big and
Yeah.
about that thick. Turkey and the Wolf is where you get it. So
Let me tell you something. My favorite food on the planet Earth is Cajun food. And Minnesota might have one of the best in the whole country. It's absolutely phenomenal. But
JD Hoyt's.
JD Hoyt's, yep, downtown Minneapolis. A bunch of good friends of mine are the owners of that, but that's not why I say it. I mean, since day one, that place has been unreal. And I can tell you this, John, whether you're in the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, soccer, or anything, every visiting team knows JD Hoyt's and goes there before the game. I mean, that's how good the food is. So those guys, they live for it. But there's a place that I love that's actually a franchise called Papado. We should get them to maybe sponsor us. We could talk about that all day long and eat it all day long too.
Yeah, they're based in Houston, Pete. Papados, Papacitos,
Yep.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And they've got seafood. They've got Greek. They're Greek, I believe, Pete,
Yeah.
the guys that own it.
Yep.
And they do a hell of a job. One of the best franchises out there.
Yep. 100%.
But folks, you're listening to The Rebel Edge. He is Pete Najarian, wearing his Golden Bear outfit, it looks like. I am John Najarian with the Turkey and the Wolf hat. Jared has no hat and no notable attire of any sort.
Except he's got a head of hair. Damn it.
He might have a head of hair. Yeah, that's true.
Bastard.
And we're going to dive into the Rebel's Edge, kicking it off with Macro Minute. After seeing today's CPI numbers, they were a little bit better than expected, Pete, but still up 5% year over year, which ain't good. Obviously, Jay Powell and the group want to address that, but they still have more work to do, and they've admitted that. We'll see exactly how much more they push, if it's just one more hike or multiple hikes. If it's multiples, I would say the market will not respond well.
Yeah, I would agree with you, John. I would say it's the slowest rise since 2021, and so that's something. But to your point, that's the good part. The bad part is, well, hell, we're still at 5% inflation. Their goal is 2%. It's a hell of a long ways away. So we still got some wood to chop, and it'll be very, very interesting to see how the Fed responds. You and I already know, because we talked about this yesterday in the Macro Minute, as well as Fantastic Futures. But wait.
Fantastic Future.
When we talked about whether or not they were going to raise, and obviously the CME does trade off of that, and they were 65%. I can tell you today, John, they're well over 70% that they will raise by a quarter. So there you go.
There you go. And as Pete mentioned, Fantastic Futures.
Fantastic Future.
Fantastic. It is fantastic.
It is fantastic. And I'm going to talk about, Pete, the Biden administration. They said, of course, that they're going to refill the SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and they're going to do it soon, they say. You think that's why the market's up $2 for crude oil today, Pete? Because they missed their shot to buy it when it was $10, $14 cheaper. Now it's up almost $18 from the 2.5 week ago low of 66. We're pushing 82, almost 83 right now. So no shock that Jennifer Granholm is going to refill the SPR at 85 or 90, just, because.
You know what? There's nothing like having a tell. We talk about it when you're playing cards and all these other things. Instead, Biden and these guys, they just tell us. They don't have a tell. They just let us know, oh, hey, we're going to start doing this. Well, we should have maybe not said a word. And when it was down there at 66 and probably for the wrong reasons, might have been a pretty good idea. John, the one real quick thing I'll say about Fantastic Futures is this. The 2-year, and the 2-year was 364 just days ago. Now, here we are at the 2-year trading at 4%. It was 5% in March 8th. It's been moving back up towards that level after getting down there in the 364 area. It's moving, and it's still right there right now as we speak, right around 4%. So I think that's something that people really want. If you want liquidity, you want to trade that, the CME is the place to go because they have absolutely incredibly liquid markets right now.
Well, I'll tell you about people who have incredible liquidity, Pete. Those would be the people in Natty, N-A-T-I,
Yep.
because National Instruments is being bought by Emerson Electric, and we had unusual activity in this one. Basically, they were buying the 5250 calls, Pete, in Natty, and those calls jumped pretty dramatically and went all the way up to being worth about $5 or more versus the entry at about $1.30.
Yeah, it's amazing, John. This has been going on for the better part of a full year. It got disclosed to the public in January, and they just keep on moving a little bit higher and a little bit higher. We're talking about a 49% premium from where they were back in January, John. That's a big number. Here's the interesting part. When you really break down everything now, if they actually execute it at this level, it's about a 20% higher than the valuations of all their competitors. So for whatever reason, Emerson really, really wants this thing to get done. They're pushing extremely hard. They're absolutely giving a max number. But at $8 billion, John, and earnings that, are okay, but it's really more about the revenue that's driving it right now. I'd like to see those earnings be a lot stronger than they are, and we aren't seeing that right now. So it's an interesting one. They might have bit off more than they want to chew if you're at Emerson.
Well, let's talk a little bit, Pete, about Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals. This one is symbol ARWR. It was up 10% like that. They announced they're going to host a research and development day June 1st. So what you guys need to know is when a company makes an announcement like that and they've got, they're calling it 20 and 25, when they're going to be presenting to the public and it's not part of a paper, you can bet that's probably good news, Pete. They wouldn't be scheduling an unscheduled meeting or, getting information from the FDA or anything else. Instead, they're getting out there saying, here's all the exciting stuff we've got.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting, John. There is a bit of a short interest here, 5-6%, something like that. That's not monstrous. We know that there are numbers far bigger than that other places, but that is a little bit of a help, I think, when you're talking about a squeeze to the upside on good news, potentially. And that's what we're seeing. They do have a high cash burn. This is going to be an aggressive move. They've only got a few stocks, John, that have actually gotten all the way down and into that phase 3 area. Most of their stocks, not stocks, most of the drugs that they're working on right now are really in about phase 1 and even, earlier than that, very early stages of clinical. So it's going to be interesting. 20 for 25, it doesn't seem totally unreasonable, but they're going to have to really start moving because they've got plenty of drugs. But as we talked about yesterday, you know what? From phase 1 to all the way getting themselves onto the market, we talked about it yesterday. What did I think? It was something like 13% are the odds that you actually get to the finish line. So it'll be a very, very aggressive thing that they're going through right now to get some of these drugs absolutely up there towards that 20 point.
Yep. I just like pointing out, just as we both did, Pete, that you don't announce something like this unless you think you've got good news.
Right.
So, that's why the stock is sustaining most of the rally that we're talking about here. Let's talk about Shopify, Pete, because JMP Securities upgraded them from market perform to market outperform, which is tomato, but I guess they like the stock to go higher, Shopify, and they work across mobile platforms. So this is not just, some web, 2.0. This is more what's in your hand on your mobile, whether it's an Instagram, whether it's on Twitter, or just somebody flashing out, that they've got stuff for sale. That's kind of the sweet spot for Shopify.
Yeah, and Shopify, John, in all honesty, it wasn't too terribly long ago. This is a stock that was trading above 150, and that was probably too high. It's dropped significantly from that level, 70% plus. So there is reason to look at it and say, you know what? They've got great revenue growth. They've got great earnings. They've got incredible free cash flow. And when you really look at the balance sheet, that looks pristine. So they really are sitting pretty right now. And I think the valuation level makes a hell of a lot more sense down here. So looking at this stock, you can understand why JMP jumped on this one today, because they see something in terms of the pullback was big, but it's maybe been too much, and maybe there's a little bit more room to the upside. I agree with them right now. We saw some option activity in here, as a matter of fact, John, and I jumped on some of that. So we'll see. We got a little bit of time, but it's a really, really interesting stock. As you said, this isn't just somebody out there. This is considered one of the better stocks out there that's in this category. And because of that, I like what we're looking at right now down here at these levels, the mid 40s, 46, 47.
Yeah. And like you said, was 150. So doesn't mean they have to retrace, but gives you an idea. At least you're not the chump that paid the top.
Yeah. The
Let's
Windsock
talk,
might have did that.
let's talk about Cruise, CRUS. This is Cirrus Logic. And by the way, folks, we used to be the specialist in the options of Cirrus Logic, or Cruise, CRUS. It was down 8%, then 10%. Now it's down over 12%, Pete. And it's pushing through 89. It's not down at the 61 level that it got to, but it is still breaking down here today because some sort of solid state button that is on the new iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro models apparently is not going to be a Cruise or a Cirrus Logic solid state button.
Yeah, and that could be a huge problem, John, if that ends up being the case. And by the way, I know that people reached out trying to figure out, is that 100%? Is that really the deal? And the answer is they didn't get any answers just yet. They didn't get it from Cirrus. They didn't get it from Apple. And here's one of the biggest problems. It can be a good thing and it can be a very bad thing. In this particular case, it looks like somewhat of a bad thing, at least as of right now, because they are so dependent, John, on Apple. I know that there were times in my career trading this name where 90% of what they were getting revenue-wise came from Apple. And as good as that can be, and that's fantastic when it works, if they make any changes, boy, tell me that doesn't hurt you pretty bad in a hurry when 90% of your revenue is coming from one source that suddenly says, you know what, we don't necessarily need you anymore. So it will be interesting to see how this actually plays out. This is a stock, John, that was just coming off of absolute highs. It hit 111 not too terribly long ago. It dipped back down off of those highs. And to your point, it's gone from 100 back down about 88 or 89. So it's taken a pretty big hit. But if this is true, that doesn't mean we're at the bottom just yet. This might take even more of a hit.
Yeah, I would say it's got at least 10 or 15 bucks more to the downside, Pete.
Yeah.
So it's not a don't touch. You could even play with puts to the downside, but we don't have unusual activity yet on the put side there.
Right.
All right, let's dive into a sports segment with you, Pete. What do you want to talk about on the sports side?
Well, we got Bruins up there on there, and for all the right reasons, John. These guys are absolutely, we've talked about them many times, but now we're getting into the playoffs and NBA, NHL. Now it's where it gets exciting. I mean, from a sports perspective, when you get to some of these different sports that play 162 games or 82 games, whatever, it is a long, long, long season. Well, here we are. We're pushing on the playoffs. These guys set records, John, 133 points. You and I have been talking about this all year long. It's not just scoring. It's not just goalies. It's both. And they are somewhere very close to the very top end in both. And so it makes it pretty interesting. As a matter of fact, goals against, the next closest, so their goals against this year were 173. The next closest to them was Carolina, the Hurricanes. They had 209. It gives you a little bit of an idea of just how good they were in the nets. And then scoring, John, it's almost the same thing. Edmonton actually is the only team that has more goals this year than the Boston Bruins, who have 300. The Oilers have 320. So it makes for something really, really interesting in the playoffs. So I guess I wanted to just throw out to you somebody this dominant that it absolutely has a record-setting year. Is there somebody out there that maybe can get him? And I'll tell you this. My opinion is it's possible. And Carolina, the team on one side, or Edmonton, the team on the other side, actually, I think could have legitimate shots to maybe take down the Bruins. But that being said, I think the Bruins are so good this year, I don't think anybody takes them out.
Yeah, this is an awful lot like, Pete, when you and I were in Chicago and Michael Jordan and the Bulls were putting up record numbers of wins. And obviously that means similarly record small number of losses. These guys set a single season record of 63 victories, the Bruins did. Now, obviously in hockey, unlike basketball, they have ties as well, but still 63 wins. That's amazing. Their center, Pete, or no, their forward. Sorry, I was going to say center. Their forward, David Pastrnak, he had a hat trick in their most recent game, and that gave him 60 goals on the season. Like you said, only Edmonton has more, and that's their captain, Connor McDavid, that has 63 or 64 goals. So, yeah, these guys are a scoring machine. They've got a great goalie. And the crowd, obviously, since this is one of the original teams, the crowd absolutely goes crazy and supports them like crazy. So very cool. And I'm with you. Somebody could beat them because they could have a mistake here or there at the wrong time. But other than that, no, they should go right through the playoffs.
Their longest losing streak was 3 games. I mean, everywhere you look, you just say, this is just remarkable. I mean, it absolutely is. I got another one for you that might start off at least remarkable, John. We're going to go to Major League Baseball. Now, if you asked anybody at the beginning of the year, you say, okay, how many games could somebody play before they get a loss? And who would it be? Well, your answers most likely would be Yankees, maybe the Mets, maybe the Dodgers, whomever. But the real answer is Titletown right here where I am in Tampa, Florida, John. Titletown, I call it that because, well, you had the Buccaneers. They got a Super Bowl. You've got the Rays. They've had a couple of many trips now, but they've been there to the World Series. You got the Lightning, who surprised everybody with all the different trips that they've made to the Stanley Cup. So Titletown's looking pretty good. And the Rays right now, John, are 11-0. They've swept every single series so far and very early. It's 11-0, though, nonetheless. But here's the interesting thing. They look like the Bruins. And when I say that, John, here's what I mean. So they've scored 83 runs. The next closest is the Dodgers. They've got 69. So not so bad, but that's a pretty good lead that they've got on them there. And then when you look at the runs against, they got 20. The next closest is the Brewers with 27. So they're doing it with pitching. They're doing it with the bats. And they're all over the place, absolutely dominating every single game thus far. Now, I think both of us would agree they're probably not going to go 162-0. But this is a hell of a nice start for a team that historically never pays anybody anything. They're almost always, John, somewhere on the very bottom bucket of what their salary is, what they're willing to pay the players. It's a hell of a nice start at 11-0, though. What do you think?
Well, as it turns out, Pete, there's a guy named Jack Wyatt who's become a good friend, and he is one of the owners of the Cincinnati Reds. Mm-hmm. And he told me, and I think I've shared with you and the viewers before, that baseball is the only major that doesn't share revenue from their TV contracts. So, you've got the Yes Network here in New York, where you've got the Mets and the Yankees feasting from having their own television revenue beyond the games that are carried game of the week and all that kind of stuff. All of their games are on the Yes Network, Pete. So Tampa and Cincinnati, the smaller market teams, do not get that. So that really means that you have to be a great judge of talent, not just, oh yeah, this is a great free agent, I'll pay him $170 million. they've had to be very disciplined. And obviously it's worked, just like it worked in Oakland. And by the way, they are the only other team that has started 11-0 were the 1981 Oakland A's that started 11-0. And we remember the movie with Brad Pitt about how that came to be.
Moneyball.
Moneyball and Michael Lewis. And I think those same guys that are the guys that say Moneyball is how you win and how you put people in the stands is winning, but it's also home runs. So that's one thing that, yeah, they've had some big hitters in Tampa and they play in that dome, but we'll see whether or not they have the money and the crowd support to be able to compete against the big money teams like the Angels, like the Yankees, like the Mets.
Yeah. Well, so far they took down Detroit, they took down Washington, Oakland, and right now in the Red Sox, they're up 2-0, and they've got a game tonight as well. So we'll find out more. By the way, I think Oakland ends up in Las Vegas in the next maybe 12 to 24 months, John. I just think it's going to happen, and I think it will happen. By the way, the combined pitching for Tampa so far this year, an ERA of 1.73. That isn't too bad. I mean, that's good for any one pitcher, let alone the entire staff. That's the average. So they are clicking right now, and it's kind of fun. And oh, by the way, that stadium actually sits in St. Pete. We call it Tampa, and they are called Tampa Bay, but everybody views that as Tampa, and this is St. Pete. But it's a great stadium, and people seem to love it. And so far, so good for them. It's a great start for the year.
Yep. And remember, folks, today's episode is being brought to you by Accelerate Tax. The Rebel's Edge proudly brought to you by Accelerate Tax. If you have a business of less than 500 employees, which would be most of us, then you could qualify for the Employee Retention Credit Program. Basically, that means that because of the things that happened during COVID, you may be eligible to receive a tax credit of up to $26,000 per employee. 10 employees is $250,000, folks. So Accelerate Tax helps people file for this. And if you're somebody who would like to see if you qualify for an ERC credit, because that's what it's called, then go on over to Accelerate, that's ACCELERATE tax, accelerate-tax.com for important information about the program. We appreciate their support for the Rebel's Edge. And we think if you have a small business, you could make a nice chunk of money back from some of the things that hit you during the pandemic. Make sure you check out Accelerate Tax. Well, with that said, we'll see you tomorrow, everybody, for the windup of the week. The fourth show is Thursday. That's our final show of the week for the Rebel's Edge. See you at 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow.